Another session of Women's Wednesdays Guyana. It's great to be back here again for a next segment. We have had our last one since last month, and this week we'll be focusing on the recent Pride Parade, Pride Week, the upcoming CCG case in Trinidad and Tobago concerning the cross-dressing laws, and also look at some other issues affecting the LGBT community. Today, we have with us here Kemal King. Thanks, Kemal, for leaving work to come and do this session with us.
Yeah.
And yeah, we'll just be having a discussion of some of these things today. So, Guyana had our first kind of Pride Week. Well, it was actually the second Pride Parade.
Yeah, because we have had Pride.
Yeah, but I think it was like the first Pride Parade.
Yeah.
But how do you feel with regards to Pride Week in general? What do you think it means for a place like Guyana?
I think it's good to normalize in the Guyanese mindset the idea of, LGBT people being like regular functioning members of society, because the prevailing opinion is that LGBT people are like this anomaly. And I think Pride activities are important to quell the ignorance and to let people know that, we enjoy ourselves and we do the same normal things everyone else does. And I mean, when I first thought of a Pride parade, or to see myself marching in a Pride parade, it was kind of like a scary prospect.
Why was it scary?
Because you look at parades in other countries, and you think, wow, these people, they have to have a tremendous level of bravery to go march in something like that. And I had never seen myself marching in a parade in Guyana, in such a conservative country, well, compared to the others. So I never saw myself marching in it, and it was different. It was so surreal to be marching in a Pride parade in Guyana. It felt like you're really a part of something great.
Yeah, definitely. And to even compound it a bit, it was the first Pride parade in the English-speaking Caribbean. So that was pretty significant to be a part of that. Now, I was pretty excited about Pride Week, the parade, and everything else, really. Because when we think about LGBT in Guyana, it's largely, you see it in a very negative, like you always hear like the negative sort of stories. So of course you'll hear whether people are being beat, or you hear whether trans persons are being attacked, but you never kind of hear like the celebratory stories, the ones that kind of validates and says, yes, we're just people, we're humans, and this is just like our identities, right? And so I felt like as much as the parade was it was definitely a protest action, a call for rights and the things that has been, well, it's our rights, right? It's not something that is to be promised to us, but governments would have made certain promises that were not really realized. So this was not only an opportunity to bring attention to that, but also to just kind of say, hey, we're here and we exist, and these are some of the things that are affecting us as a community. Yeah, so that was pretty significant for me, and I had a lot of fun. Did you have fun?
Yeah. I couldn't help but put myself like at the front of the parade, jumping around with my flag.
Yes, I saw you were like a queer icon and just kind of flying all around.
Yeah,
it definitely was really great being a part of it. And if you might have missed the parade this year, don't worry, you always have next year. It will be bigger, it will be better. And we hope to see you there because it will be amazing, right? And don't only come to the parade, you have to ensure that you come to all Pride activities. We put a lot of work into these guys. Right? So I like it because it's basically creating a space that's not readily available, particularly in the Caribbean, where we are still fighting with so many different issues.
And now you're seeing that Barbados and Parade Barbados and Trinidad are planning their own parades and activities. So we can set something in motion.
Yeah, I definitely saw it. And Trinidad, Tarianne Roy is commenting now. She's one of the organizers for the Trinidad Pride that's coming up. Thankfully, I'll be there for some of the activities. because we will be there for the upcoming Caribbean Court of Justice case concerning the cross-dressing law. Now, that's another thing that has kind of been on the radar.
Right.
Because when we think about the cross-dressing law, we have to think not only... I think people look at it as just people who want to dress up as women.
As women, yeah.
That's how I feel like they look at it. What do you think of the cross-dressing law? I mean, I know we have like very similar thoughts on it, but let me hear yours.
Yeah, so I think it's ridiculous. First of all, I don't like calling it cross-dressing in relation to trans people, because they're not cross-dressing, they're dressing according to their gender identity. There are, like, you know, drag queens, but we have to quell the ignorance and make the distinction between trans people and drag queens. I think a lot of people get the idea that trans women are men who just put on dresses and makeup, and when they go home they just take it off. No, that's their identity, that's who they are. They don't take it off at the end of the day. That is them. That is how they identify, and that's how they express themselves. So I think people need to understand that difference. Sometimes when you try to make a cisgender person understand what it's like to experience life as a transgender person, we'd say, imagine you, a man, wearing dresses and makeup, how people would treat you. But what we should really tell them is, imagine society hating you for identifying the way that you identify right now. Like, imagine me walking out in my suit and tie and people on the streets telling me, no, you have to wear dresses. That is what it's like for trans people. What they're accustomed to, who they are, what they grew up knowing themselves to be, that is what people hate them for. So that is what the experience of being transgender is like. I mean, I can't speak for it.
Yeah.
But I can say that I think that is what it represents.
Okay, when I think of the cross-dressing law, because it's one of these small charges that has been with us since, it's a remnant of colonial law.
Yeah.
And it's been with us forever, that we just seem to refuse to get rid of. And it criminalizes trans women particularly. That's why I found that ruling by Justice Ian Chang so disturbing, because he was like, cross-dressing is not illegal unless it's for an improper purpose. Now, of course, improper purpose was not defined. And then when you live in that kind of subjective area there for people to just kind of play around with, then you're just giving them space to promote their biases, because for instance, you might get one judge today who's totally cool with trans identities, but the next day you might not have that. And we've had several cases wherein persons trying to access justice, access the court system, are being turned away from court just because they are dressed in the attire conforming to their gender identity. Right? And I think when it comes to cross-dressing, I'm not sure if I'm right here, but I think there's a distinction between cross-dressers and trans persons. Yeah. Because while a trans person will dress in the attire of the identity they might identify with, a cross-dresser can still dress in clothes not conforming to their identity specifically, but they might just want to wear something occasionally, or they might just be gender fluid or some different thing. So I feel like there's different aspects to that also to examine. But on the upcoming court case, the hearing is on this Wednesday, the 28th.
This Wednesday?
Not this Wednesday, the next week Wednesday. Is next week Wednesday, and then we'll be having a community meeting before the hearing. That's on the 27th at Kaiso House in Trinidad. And after the hearing, we'll also have a meeting, but we'll have to update you folks on that. But when it comes to just kind of respecting trans rights and identities in Guyana, I don't feel like we've made a lot of progress.
You're right.
Really?
We make more progress for LGBT people than trans people.
Yeah. What do you think are some of the barriers to that? What is hindering that sort of cohesive movement in the LGBT community?
Well, first of all, I think when we move in spaces with advocates and activists like we move in, we know that the LGBT community includes trans people, but our language and our activities, I feel like it kind of puts gay people on the forefront. Like we say, oh, it's a gay parade or it's a gay party. I think that conditions us to put gay people ahead of everything. And we've been getting a good level of acceptance and advocacy for gay people, but then trans people come in and people think that they don't know what they're standing up for because they think the community is just gay people, a man dating another man or a woman dating another woman. The LGBT community, it's not just about sexual orientation. It's about people who don't conform to the gender identity that society expects them to conform to. It's also about people who don't conform to the gender expression that everyone wants them to conform to. And people need to understand that it's not just for people of alternate sexual orientations. It's also about deviating from gender norms.
Yeah, and the more I think about it, with regards to just respecting trans rights, we definitely do not pay a lot of attention to it. And the point you made about just trying to making it seem as if it's all about like the gay community, and I've been guilty of this too. Yeah. It's just kind of something that you automatically do. For instance, I identify as bisexual, but I always say the gay.
Yeah,
right?
I say the gays.
Yeah, so it's just like something that we keep kind of perpetuating. And I mean, I don't see a lot of harm in it, but I do see how it can sort of impede them. Yes. So I think it's just kind of be a bit more mindful about language and inclusion. Of course, we won't get everything right. It's a work in progress. So nobody's trying to say if you know something, well then you're wrong or something. Yeah. I think people get that idea wherein they think we're always ready to attack, like the left is always ready to attack them for getting something wrong. It's okay, guys. We understand that it's a work in progress. If you don't know something, always feel free to ask. For instance, particularly when it comes to trans persons, if you don't know what their gender identity is, just a simple question. What do you identify as? What do you identify as?
What are your pronouns?
What are your pronouns? Right? And if it's not possible to ask them, then if the closest gender identity, the way in which they express themselves, maybe that's a safe bet to go. Right? So just throwing that in there.
I know I hate that a lot of people think it's too much of a bother to ask what are your pronouns or what do you identify as, to just change that. But I feel like people are more sensitive to pronouns of like other people's pets and stuff, but they don't want to give trans people the same decency.
Yeah, for sure.
And
no, he's a boy, not a girl.
Yeah, they're like, oh my god, sorry.
Yeah, definitely. So the more you respect the people's rights, for instance, people get really upset when you misgender them. Yeah. Right? I know a lot of men get really upset when you misgender them.
Right.
So, I mean, I know that is rooted in some serious kind of misogyny, that thing to just kind of not want to be labeled feminine or have any sort of qualities.
Yes.
But just think about that for a minute, the way in which you react when you're misgendered, and think about that from the perspective of a trans person now.
Right.
And I mean, trans persons deal with so many issues. They're already so very marginalized. They're the most marginalized community in the LGBT community.
Right.
And on top of transphobia from the larger community, they have to deal with their own a lot of internal issues. Yeah. So I mean, it's tough. The most we can do is try to respect their pronouns, respect their gender identities, and make sure they know that they're valid, because they are, right?
They are.
Now, one of the things with Justice Chang's ruling that cross-dressing was only illegal for improper purposes.
Yeah.
Was that it was not clearly defined. What did you think of that ruling? And do you think that the hearing next week will give us a bit of more progressive outcome, maybe get some sort of, what do you expect from it? What do you hope to see?
I expect them to say that law should be struck down. That is what I expect from the Caribbean Court of Justice. I think the whole improper purpose thing is nonsense. A lot of people have explained that they think improper purposes would mean if people cross-dress to go commit a crime or something. But there are already laws on the books that there are provisions for if someone commits a certain crime. If someone, a man wears a wig and he decides to go rob a store, there's a law that will penalize him for doing that, for robbing the store. And I think including that improper purpose thing, it just kind of provides space for people to attack trans people whenever they want.
Yeah, definitely, because I found it so odd when Chang said that the law was not discriminatory in nature. But when you look at every single person who was being picked up with regards to this law, it was trans women. So, of course, if you have a law that only seeks to marginalize an already marginalized community, then how can you say it's not discriminatory when it clearly is? Yeah. So, one of the things that we were talking about with the case was that persons kind of see anything sort of LGBT related, any action against the court as as pursuit for marriage equality. I don't know where they get this idea from. I think it's such a westernized thing. I mean, we have different issues to deal with in the Caribbean. We can't be thinking about marriage when you're thinking about structural and administrative violence, right? And I mean, that's the sort of thing that's been going on with trans persons. It's either they're being killed in the streets or they're being forced out of the what do you call it? Employment sector.
Yes.
Yeah, like the employment sector. So they're forced into alternative avenues where they have to seek things in the,
like trans people being forced into sex work, even though they might have other aspirations. I think what you mentioned about people thinking advocacy for LGBT rights is just about marriage equality, it has a lot to do with how the media portrays anything that happens in the LGBT community.
Yes.
Every time something happens, you'd see in the paper, foreign diplomat wants Guyana to legalize same-sex relationships. It's always something to that wording. And I think that news agencies, they use that controversial wording and that ignorance to get ratings. And that's something they should hold themselves accountable for. Yeah, the media, I don't believe they understand the very important role they have to play. I mean, I know there are a few of them who really do try to attempt to get it right. But almost daily we have cases where we see articles that are blatantly disrespectful to trans identities, their lives, and those sort of things, and it just kind of seeks to diminish the person's character merely because they're a different gender identity or sexual orientation. Now, if you're in the media, I understand that not everything you might be able to. Oh, we have somebody rapping. It's Nkosi? I'm not sure.
Okay.
You want to go check?
Yes, you can go.
Okay, great.
Check. Okay, so we're expecting one other person, so he's gone to check and see if that was that person arriving there. But on the case of the media, it's very important to try to get things right, ensure that we have accurate information. Whatever you're putting out into the public. Hi, welcome. We're now, hello.
Hi.
We have Nkosi Bruce here. Say hi, Nkosi.
Hi,
everyone. Yeah, we were now talking about the role of the media in ensuring, negative stories about the LGBT community are not just kind of perpetuated and continued. Because one of the things that we should always aim to do, as we aim for a more progressive society, is to be more inclusive in our reporting and our language and that sort of thing. What are your thoughts on the media reporting with regards to LGBT issues? Have you ever seen any sort of thing that just kind of struck out as odd to you?
Personally, no. My experience, at least with the young reporters now, is they're not that apprehensive towards reporting on LGBT issues. We're willing to report, what is fact, what is fiction. Mm-hmm. And from what I have seen, at least, they don't hold their punches and they say it as it is. But the older heads, I know they tend to be a bit more reserved. Mm-hmm. The stalwarts in the reporting industry, they might more be apprehensive and conservative about speaking on LGBT rights. Because, for instance, the Pride Parade itself, Newsroom had a really nice video that they put together.
Yes, it was so beautiful. I loved it. It was amazing.
And that's just to show you that. And that report is a very young reporter, a friend of mine. Mm-hmm. And that's to show, the younger generation, we coming up, we aren't as conservative as our older heads.
Yeah, definitely. I saw that Newsroom report, and that was one of the best coverages for the Pride Parade.
I saw myself with the flag and stuff.
Yeah, I was telling him you look like a queer icon with that flag earlier, just kind of running down the road in the breeze. Yeah, so I saw both of you there at the parade, enjoying yourselves. Now, the close thing, you were there as an ally. Thank you so much for coming out and supporting. It was really so great to see so many people there. But as attendees of the march and kind of witnessing everything that was happening, what do you think that march, the Pride Week in general, meant for Guyana? And what were some of the responses that you might have gotten if you were viewed there?
It was, okay. For me, it was a monumental step for Guyana, at least. It's us, it's our people saying, you know what, we're going to move away from this backward ideology that we have that, oh God, you can't do this, you can't. People love who they love, and you shouldn't have any say in that, right? We move away from that. As it relates to the backlash from attending this thing, oddly enough, the backlash has only come from family.
Yeah. Yes.
I have not experienced backlash from friends, from my associates, nothing. And oddly enough, my family can tell me things like, oh, people ain't gonna let you live this down, but really and truly, y'all's the only ones that bringing it up. Mm-hmm. And how do you explain that to them? How do you tell them, listen, the society that we're in now, my generation, we're taking over. And this is our stance on this particular issue. Yeah. We understand that you might have your thought and this is what you think it should be. However, you are no longer going to be the ones in charge. This is our society now, and we're going to say this is what we want.
Okay.
I love it.
I love it. Yes, definitely. And the more... the younger generation we're coming up, we're definitely a lot more progressive. Yeah. And so we definitely will see a lot more movements going forward. But at the same time, I don't think that we should relax because, the religious community, the right is very organized, right? Yeah. So and we still need to keep on our toes.
I know, I was told point blankly, those people, they've made their choice. You don't need to support them. They don't need your support. And I told my parents, listen, you see, that's the problem. The minute you tell yourself that they don't need the support, that is where their opposers win. Mm-hmm. Because now their opposers can say, nobody's backing them. Nobody thinks what they're doing is correct. Yeah. And if we had that ideology when we were fighting for women's rights, when we were fighting for rights for colored people, if people just said, oh, they picked their struggle, we don't have to support them, we'd never have any change. Right. You as a woman, you'd not be able to vote. You don't have any say. You have to do whatever I said because I'm a man. But no, people like me saw that you had a struggle and they said, you know what? You need the support. And this is very much the same thing. The LGBT community needs the support. What's wrong with me offering that support?
Yeah, and you see the thing with the persons, when they see allies, they automatically try to denigrate the person or just kind of make it into something entirely that it's not. And it just kind of tells you a lot about who they are as people. And you could blame them a bit, but you can't entirely blame them because, it's a culture you kind of grew up into. Correct. But at the same time, you have to take account of your behavior, your attitudes, what that might have stemmed from. Kemal, what about you? What are some of the reactions that you might have got from being witness to the parade?
Wow. I knew that there would be a lot of consequences being in this parade. When I went there first, I actually intended to just, stay on the sidelines or be in the middle of the crowd so that I wouldn't get noticed.
Then see him running straight.
When I picked up the energy of the parade, I did a live video and I put myself at the front, and I'm like, oh, this is going to hit me when I leave here.
Yeah.
But in the moment, I did not care. I just really enjoyed myself.
I didn't think that far ahead when I was there, right? But people like yourself, people who thought, you know what, I want to go to this thing, but I frightened what will happen.
Yeah, a lot of people message me saying, I want to go, I want to support, or I want to support my community, but I don't know what my family will say. And when I left, I was thinking of how the people in my community would look at me, or if people would taunt me, people in my hometown. And like you said, your biggest critics are usually your family. So those are the people I got the biggest backlash from. There are people in my family who knew that I'm queer, but they were quiet about it on the condition that I would not openly state who I am. And they got more angry and reacted in a negative manner when I actually went out there, because now they'd have to answer to their friends and
answer
so
to the
on.
public.
Yeah, and I think people need to they need to have a stronger sense of who they are, and they need to realize that, in my opinion, family is much more important than what your friends will think. So I got a lot of emotional turmoil after I had to face the consequences of appearing publicly and being on the front page of Stavro on Sunday.
Wow.
But still, I don't regret it. I'm gonna power through.
Great. Yeah, I'm so glad that even though you kind of knew the consequences that you would have faced, you decided that this was something that you needed to do and it was important to you, and you did it. Yeah. And I mean, the consequences did come, but they weren't as bad, I hope, as you might have imagined that they would be. And even for those who would have wanted to come out to the parade and might not have been able to because they are still in the closet, we understand that you're not ready to come out. Don't let anybody tell you that you need to come out of this proverbial closet if it's not safe, if you're not ready. I feel like self-acceptance is the most important thing. Yes. So once you know who you are, and if you feel comfortable telling just a few friends, or if you feel you're ready to tell your family or whatever, that's totally up to you. And I feel that that's something that we need to say more, to let people know that the option is totally theirs. Right?
Yeah, there's a lot of strength in coming out to people. I think we take in all this Western media that tells us. We see people coming out through a letter to the public, or they make some announcement, or they post it on their social media, and everybody knows. But in reality, coming out is so much more drawn out and complicated than that. If you're really scared and you're dealing with a lot of fear. So, for example, I came out to a friend, then another friend, then a third friend. Then I started posting cryptic messages on social media. And then I talked to my mom, and then I talked to my other cousin. So it goes on and on. It's not just so simple as coming out to one person.
Yeah, coming out is just kind of a continuous process. And I feel like that's what I tried to avoid it when I kind of came out, right? Because I was like, you know what? I never deal with this kind of individual conversation. Firstly, nobody never had to tell me they were heterosexual. Why I need to tell them about my sexuality. But I decided to just write a blog post and say, well, you know what, this. And that's basically how everybody found out. My friends, my family, everybody. I mean, I got some serious backlash from it, but at the end of the day, I didn't feel like having to repeat that conversation all the time. So that was a method that worked for me, right? It's not necessarily one that will work for other people. Now, one of the things that affects LGBT persons is really the discrimination, right? And this, of course, channels into several different areas, from education to health to the court system and all these different things. Now, when we're thinking about like access to education, what are some of the things you believe that both the government and us as a society can do to be more inclusive and accepting of LGBT children?
They have to have strong anti-bullying policies because the Georgetown Law Human Rights Institute came to Guyana recently and they did a study, and a good portion of their study talked about how LGBT children experience a lot of bullying. And, the books say that everyone deserves a right to education, but not everyone gets to go to school and experience the same level of acceptance and tolerance. A lot of people are bullied so much that they have to leave school or they're homeschooled if they can afford that. So it hinders you from accomplishing. And when you're a gay child or a child who's questioning their gender identity and you're facing a lot of discrimination in school, you have that much more burden to focus on as opposed to what a cis het person experiences in school, and you don't get to focus on your schoolwork. It really puts a lot on your mind. As a child, it's more difficult to deal with that than an adult now coming to terms with that.
Okay. And Nkosi?
Okay. This might be a biased opinion. I went to Saint, and personally, I don't see based on what I've experienced, I don't see discrimination towards LGBT persons at a certain education level.
Yeah.
Below a certain education level, it's profound, and that's because of the community that they grew up in.
What do you mean education level?
All right, I'm willing to.
Okay, you're talking about certain institutions.
Certain institutions,
Okay.
because I found personally senior secondary schools, with the exceptions of probably Joseph Brigham has a senior sec. Certain schools, to be perfectly honest, certain schools, the children there, because of their mindset, because of their openness to learn, because of their acceptance of certain things in the world, they don't question a person's sexuality. That's never the first thing that comes to your mind. Oh, this person gay. I went to school with people who were gay, and I figured they were gay. I never asked because I figured that's not the right way to do it.
Right.
But I figured, they probably weren't too sure about their sexuality. But I never once came up to them and said, ask them about it or make it a part of my decision to line with them or to hang with them or anything. Because everybody needs to feel included.
Right.
And I have also seen that below a certain educational threshold, the mindset is a bit more primitive. And I'm willing to say that that's because of the community in which the person comes from.
What?
I don't like that you're saying below and above and levels, but I understand what you
understand where I'm coming from?
Yes.
Okay. I don't want to. Okay.
Yeah, but definitely understand what you're saying. But I think a factor that has to play in a lot of these situations is access, because a lot of persons in these same kind of marginalized communities, they don't have the same sort of access to resources such as proper education, getting resources to go to school, so they might not be able to study. And so, of course, they might not get into one of these senior schools. So, of course, it has to deal with all these kind of surrounding implications and the society in which they grew up in that influences their thought. But definitely, it is something that I went to an all-girls school. Like,
that must have been fun.
it actually was not. It was terrible. Okay. It was really terrible because it's a religious school, right?
Also, everything was really gendered. Teaching you how to be a lady. And stuff
yes, teaching you how to be a lady, and so and the thing is that we had like an all-boys school not far from us, and you used to call them like brother schools, right?
Yeah.
And so there was always some sort of issues wherein, if the girls were not being castigated because there was suspected friendships between the girls, they were being castigated because of suspected friendships again between the boys. So it was that same sort of really thing where you had religious people just constantly trying to curb young people's sexual impulses,
behavior.
when a lot of times there was no impulses there because it was just children, you know?
Even in like public secular or stated secular schools, there's still a heavy influence of religion. I don't think that we've completely secularized our public schools. Like we still say prayers,
religious prayers.
Like we have a lot of traditions from religion that people are expected to take part in, and I think that kind of makes LGBT students feel marginalized. I mean, they are like LGBTQ Christians and Muslims and Hindus, but religion should not be in the education sector. It should not be forced onto students.
I'm willing to accept and admit that religion isn't something that should be forced onto a student. Mm-hmm. However, at the same time, we have to understand that for some persons, religion is their comfort.
Yeah.
And if that is your comfort, by all means, you should feel, you should be allowed to indulge in your comfort. Right. However, I draw the line where you begin to force it on someone else.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, and I feel like that's one of the issues with the whole like prayer in school things is that it's largely just Christian prayers. Mm-hmm. And I mean, Guyana is a very diverse society. We have different religions.
And again, this could be just my experience, but at least when I was at GSA, whenever we would have a function, they would never just do a Christian prayer. I don't know if somebody decided that this is the step we should take or whatever the case may be, but we would always have a Christian prayer, a Muslim prayer, and if possible, a Hindu.
Yeah, I do know that some institutions do that in the name of inclusivity, but it definitely is not like in the majority.
No,
definitely is not in the majority.
And again, you'd only find it at the more tertiary institutions. You won't find it so much in secondary schools.
Yeah. So there's this whole debate about Christian prayers in schools is one that's been existing a very long time, and we still can't seem to get rid of it for some reason. I mean, the previous Minister of Education, Rupert Rupnarine, had promised to remove it from the schools, but that didn't happen. Hopefully, we'll see that sometime in the future, but I don't know. Politicians. Yeah, but one of the things that I wanted us to touch on before we just kind of wrap up, though, is the exclusion of LGBT persons from the Prevention of Discriminations Act.
Yes.
I mean, it's about time that we're included.
It is.
It's about time. Because when you think about the Prevention of Discrimination Act, it influences so much things from your employment opportunities that you have. And so to not have sexuality, gender identity in there is basically saying, well, you don't have the same rights as me, and because you were a specific sexuality or gender identity, then you don't necessarily have that same sort of leeway to make certain decisions. And that's something that needs to be recognized. Now, I don't know how necessarily we can go about pressuring for the inclusion of gender identity and sexuality in the Discrimination Act, but I do think it's something that's very necessary particularly when it comes to workplaces. What do you think?
You see, the thing about pressuring for, to avoid discrimination is it lies a lot in a person's own personal bias, the person that's the employee. Because even if those policies are in place, you come to me looking for a job. I realize you're queer. I don't want no queer working with me, so I deny your application. I don't have to give you a reason why I denied. There's no reason for me to tell you this and this is why you failed the interview. This is why I'm not going to hire you. There is no stipulation in the process to say that this I have to do this. Now, for you to go now and make a claim that to probably labor or whoever handles that kind of situation that, oh, I'm being discriminated against because of my sexuality. How can you prove it? It's not something that we can rely solely on policy for.
You're right.
Or we have to shift the mindset of persons who are going to be at the head of these businesses, persons who are going to be doing these interviews, people who are going to be employing other persons. We need to instill in their minds that, listen, because of a person's sexuality, it should not influence whether or not you decided they should work for you. It should be based on their qualification, based on their merits.
You're right. I definitely don't think including sexual orientation and gender identity in there is a cure-all, but it does go a long way to change the mindset and tell people that, your constitution, your government is here for you. And there are many situations in the workplace where people can still say, I was discriminated against because of my gender identity, because of my sexual orientation, even in cases where people were refused from employment because of their identities. There's still cases where people can make a case and prove that they discriminated against me because I'm queer.
Okay. I mean, it's really good that you have access to those sort of resources, and definitely policy is not a cure-all. We have to ensure that we have a wider approach to these issues because, I mean, for instance, just to give another example, when you look at the abortion laws, I mean, abortion has been legal so very long in Guyana, but we're still having abortion-related deaths because, one, people don't really know it's legal.
I did not.
You did it, right?
No,
yeah, people don't really know it's legal. Two, they just don't have access to reproductive services, particularly if they're living in outlying communities. Just about maybe it was 2 years ago, a woman injected gramazone into her stomach to try to get an abortion.
What?
Yeah, and these are the sort of things that are happening. So definitely policy, not a cure-all, but it is a step in the right direction to just kind of tell people that these are the rights that are afforded to them and is ensured by the Constitution, ensured by the state, and that sort of thing. Yes. Hi, Andy.
Hi.
We're actually wrapping up.
You are?
Yes.
So I come in time.
Yes, we were supposed to be joined by Andy Small from GAIBO, the Guyana Rainbow Foundation. She had some work to do, so she's now here.
Prior commitment. Sorry.
Thanks for finally joining us. And how are you?
Tired.
Great. So we were talking, we were just kind of wrapping up a bit and discussing the various issues affecting LGBT population. I know GAIBO had a very active role to play in the organization of Pride Week. What are some of the things that went well for you, and what do you hope to see come in for next year's Pride?
Well, for me, everything went well. But within the community, I would like to see a lot more support between ourselves, and I would even like to congratulate the general public on how they
Yes! Good job, guys!
Yeah.
No. All right.
Because it's like, don't give them no problem.
Why did I say
It was
that?
better than
No
expected.
violence.
It was devoid of violence. It was, and I'm happy to see that it was.
And we
Right?
didn't have a counter protest.
Correct. We did not. People, and this is the thing with Guyanese, they tend not to be confrontational.
Yeah.
So they're not going to come out there and parade in your face and tell you, we want to do this.
They can write letters to the editor.
They write letters to the editor. They're going to post on Facebook. You could see the comments under the feed. You know, the negativity is there. And we're lying to ourselves if we decide to live in a safe space where we tell ourselves, oh, people loved it. Yes. Or like-minded individuals loved it. But the majority of Guyanese, while they refuse to speak about it, some of them still have that bias in their heart that I can't accept this.
Yeah, we know that, but I think considering our history, that we should be happy about what we have right now.
Yes.
Progress.
We have come a long way from back then to now. Yeah.
Yeah, man.
Because I can remember in let's say 2006. I was on the road, a guy was walking along Grove Street in a dress, and they had some guys, you know what they call a sycamore tree? Now I think it fallen.
Yeah, man, sycamore tree.
Yeah, man, in town, in front of high court.
It fall the other day.
Good. So I can remember a guy blatantly shine a bottle at the guy that was cross-dressed. So I think we've come a long way from then to now.
What if I told you I see that exact same thing last week?
I won't say you're lying, but I won't say you're lying, but we still got a far way to go.
We do. But what I'm looking at is that we're gaining ground.
Yes. And a lot more people are speaking out.
Yes.
In favor of the community.
Yeah.
So
when people get accustomed to seeing us in the media and doing our thing, then they'll care less about interrupting our lives.
Yeah, and
I feel it's a hopeful wish.
I mean, for me, I think the mere fact that we're not protesting or trying to get same-sex marriage We're just trying to gain visibility and understanding within the Guyanese population. I don't see it being such a hard note. The biggest bridge that we need to cross would be with government. Whereby if once they decriminalize the Buggery law and acknowledge same-sex relationships, we should be on the right path. But given our Christian background and heritage of Guyana, it's still a little far away, but one day at a time we'll take it.
One day at a time, indeed. Yeah, and I think when we think about change, a lot of us think that it's immediate. I mean, yes, there is immediate change, but I think when we think about moving towards it gradually, ensuring that we just kind of get all the elements in there, that's the sort of sustained movement that we need. So don't look for instantaneous change like that. It's a work in progress. And I mean, there are issues that will inevitably come up and we'll feel as if we are back to square one. But there has been progress and we have a long more way to go. And thank you, everybody, for coming today and being such a very great crowd. And thank you, everybody, for tuning in. You've been a great audience. And we will see you again soon. Goodbye.
Bye.